All right. Welcome to Hey, What Did I Miss? Joining me, I have three great gentlemen who decided to pop on. We have Mr. Andre Jennings, aka Coach Andre. Been coaching for 5 to 6 years now with me at the middle school level, and also a faithful parent to the school we're at. With two young boys that drive us all crazy, but we love them. Then we have, welcome back, Mr. K, our guidance counselor friend extraordinaire. And then we have Mr. Adam Larson, basketball advocate and lacrosse enthusiast, and also a parent. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining the show.
Dad gang, let's go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I called you all on because this idea of this blurred line of toxic and competitive keeps popping up on the news and on Instagram and YouTube. We see a lot of parents going overboard during these tournaments, stepping in, hitting the ref, just being like completely out of control. I wanted to take you guys' take right on what is the difference between being toxic and competitive, and how blurry is that line, or does it have to be? Who would like to go first? Let's talk about a situation, a competitive situation they've been in, or seen, or heard about where it's gotten completely out of control and toxic.
I could go first. Just a short story. Coaching. I'm your assistant coach, but every now and then I get my shine as the JV coach. I'm the head coach. I had a player, and we talked about this earlier, playing time, and players are gassed up by their friends and their family thinking they deserve more. That's always an issue. I remember distinctly coaching a game, very close game. We lost the game, and I had to leave immediately because, as you know, Coach, I work nights and weekends, restaurant business. As soon as the game ended, I had to leave. I had to run to get to work on time. And we're volunteers. We don't get paid anything. And a mom cornered me right outside the game. She's probably all of 5'2", but the venom she spit at me because her child didn't get enough playing time, and he's a soccer player and he has commitments, and if this is the only playing time he's going to get, we're done. And I mean, she tore into me like I hadn't been torn into since I was about 13 years old, and I got caught cutting school. And that was very jarring. That was a very jarring experience for me because, like I said, we're volunteers, or I'm a volunteer. I'm a parent. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a para. I'm not an employee of the DOE. I got into coaching just to spend more time with my kids and be a mentor to some other really great kids, which I thought I was doing. In that moment, I kind of questioned everything I had done up until that point. Like, is this even worth it? Never, ever had that entered my mind before, except in that moment. And I just felt like, speaking of toxicity, how that kind of poisoned the experience for me. And I think that's what this conversation is really about. It's about, there's competition, there's competitiveness, but once you kind of inject something that doesn't naturally belong into it, once you poison it, it changes it. And it changes it not only for the child, it changes it for everyone involved. And that's something that shouldn't be a part of athletics or anything. Athletics, academics, no matter what, the arts, music, it doesn't matter.
Thanks, Coach. Yeah, I remember that incident, and I've had a lot of those run-ins myself.
Well, that was my first.
That was your first, yeah. And the first, right? The first usually sticks with you the longest.
It certainly does.
And it does. It makes you question, why? Because you're doing stuff out of the kindness of your heart. You're taking your time. You're taking the time away from your family, your kids to do this. You think you're helping, and then you're like, wait a minute, why am I doing this again? Why am I getting yelled at? But you stuck it out. You made it through the season. You're still doing it. So I appreciate that. Who would like to go up next?
As you know, Coach, I've had the joy of playing against you competitively and also as a teammate. There were times when we were younger, we were going back and forth. We were always competitive. If we didn't know each other, it would have been toxic. That's kind of like how fine the line is. Because if you have the skills and you have the talent, and someone else also has the skills and the talent, and you have a good competition, the emotion overflows. And when that emotion overflows, you knew when you had me, you knew when I was out of the game. but I was still getting minutes because they couldn't take me off the court. And you're like, yep, you're done. My biggest thing, being a player, being a coach, and now being an adult and still playing in adult lacrosse league and still seeing guys getting into scuffles and whatnot. When we're kids, we're taught the skills and we're taught to have a fire within us. We're taught to have the hard work and the physical discipline, but we're never trained to have the mental discipline for when things don't go our way. And that to me is ultimately where the toxicity comes in. It's like life. You're gonna get things going your way, you're gonna get things not going your way. You can be physically tough and tough it out, but are you mentally tough and equally mentally tough? So that when you say, you know what, I want to drop 30 points this next game. So now you're gonna add fuel to your fire, and you're gonna go out and you're gonna do the work. And just because you're doing the work physically, you're not training yourself mentally either. To keep going with that analogy of a fire, if you don't do that, you keep building your fire up, your fire is going to spread over. That's really the moment where you see, even sometimes now, professional athletes just kind of going at each other.
Disclaimer: he's the only player that make me have to get a pick from the opposite foul line in order to break free. And let's not talk about it anymore because we're gonna fight right now. Okay, but I love that we're taught all the physical skills, right? But then when it comes to the mental aspect, especially growing up, right, it was, we'll figure it out, toughen it up. To me, it sounded like, okay, just hold it in and just deal with it, right? Don't let it pop. You know, that one foul call you don't get, or that little bump you got from somebody, you explode, and then it becomes what? Toxic, very toxic situation, and then you're out of control, and then nobody really knows why you're out of control because you were never taught. You know, it goes along the lines of previous conversations we had, right? You're never taught how to deal with your emotions, right? You're never taught how to deal with the mental aspects of stuff. You're just told physically handle it and then work it out.
For me, it's so I went to all boys school from kindergarten to 8th grade. And then, so during that time, middle school, now in Haiti, we joke that, we get taught how to play soccer before we learn the alphabet. We make a joke about that because when you look at the literacy aspect on the island, the education on the island, you'll find more kids who know how to play soccer than the ones that actually know how to read. It's something that there is a need to change that front. But because of that, the competitive nature of it is really, really high, to the point that when it does get toxic, people don't even realize it. And for me, I didn't really realize it was toxic until I moved to this country, because it was mental aspect that Adam mentioned here is not a conversation that I had in Haiti. Like, I'm a counselor now, so I essentially went completely against everything I was taught when it comes to mental health, which was nothing. So many times what would happen in the fields when we would play soccer, and I actually remember the coach that was with us, he used to call me un photocopie, which translates to essentially just like a copy of a person that's just kind of floating on the field, and wherever the wind blows it, that's pretty much what it is. So he would repeatedly remind me of how useless I was on the field because I wasn't good. So every time it was when, if I couldn't work with the team, or if I couldn't hit the ball properly, or if I couldn't get a goal, every time it was something where we're like, well, I guess we could put him on the field. I mean, I don't see the point. So it would be over and over again, where I saw the difference, interestingly, with another student in my grade. He was competitive, but whenever I was struggling, he would come to me and say, hey, why don't you try this way? Why don't you try that way? Like, he was always there boosting everybody up in the team, while the coach himself was just getting angry whenever somebody did not do something, or did not follow the play, or made a mistake. And mind you, this wasn't even during like a competition. Sometimes it would just be during practice, or just some regular after school scrimmage. And the way he just got so angry, it turned me off from soccer for a long time. Because of that, it made me distant from a lot of people in Haiti, because soccer was just the thing in Haiti. In Haiti, when the World Cup was in Haiti, If you weren't talking about the World Cup, you had nothing to talk about. Everyone, it was a big thing. Like the final, the World Cup, honestly, sometimes there's a lot of political unrest in Haiti, and the World Cup is a godsend because everything just stops. It was the one time that the island honestly just unifies. Like that's one positive aspect of it, but then it also contributed to the negative aspect of it when it comes to how people handled being competitive when it came to soccer. Typically, when you hear someone going to therapy or the mental health, that means something is wrong with them. That like you would hear, oh, it's not good when a man is trying to find themselves. Like honestly, I can tell you when it comes to being mentally mature, emotionally mature, my sisters were a lot more emotionally mature than I am because they were allowed to talk about what was going on with them at a very young age. Me and my brothers, it was always tough it up, get over it, man up. It was always that same notion that we got over and over again. So as a result, my brothers, it took them longer to be able to reach that emotional maturity to not be toxic, where sometimes they would even do it to my sisters. And my sisters would call them out about it, but then they would listen. But then when I said it to them, then they listened, even though I said the same thing that my sisters did. But somehow it coming from another man to them, I guess they felt it was more relatable. So that's where I ended up having to find a way to bring everybody together to get them to realize, okay, this is what we grew up with. The worst is I thought going to my aunts or my mother, since they're women, I thought that I would get a different narrative. But because that toxic masculinity narrative is so ingrained in our culture, even the women participated in it also. So there was really not much of an outlet. It was literally the same. It was a consistent narrative over and over and over again. So to the point that now, when it comes to sports, I have a bit of a distance to it still. My brother, not so much because he's just kind of, told everybody, I'm not living for you, I'm living for me. But me, I'm more of a people person. So I relied a lot on how people felt, how people connected to me, how I connected to people. And when you kept being fed that negativity over and over and over again, when it came to sports, at some point you're just thinking, okay, maybe this isn't just for me then. This is not. It kind of makes you wonder, with other kids that face the same thing, how much potential was lost when it comes to how much they could have been today. Like, did we miss out on the next LeBron James? Did we miss out on the next anybody when it comes to football or basketball or hockey or anything, just because that they got shut down at during their foundational years? So it makes me think a lot when I think about that example that I had in middle school and how it just reverberated over and over again all over the island.
We thank Mr. K for stepping in. So along those lines of just as a coach now, I try my best to incorporate the emotional and mental side of it with me being a teacher. Look for those things because they train us to look for the emotional and social emotional aspect of the children. So I try to incorporate that in my coaching, whereas I ask them about how they're feeling and what's going on in their head and try to navigate that so they can have the best experience possible. Because there's nothing worse than a kid not being ready and prepared to play a game after they train so hard and just being out of it. Perfect example of where competition can possibly meet a toxic moment. I was upstate watching a tournament, a JUCO tournament. This kid had just gotten his second foul in the first half. He's complaining his body language is horrible. He brushes by his teammates and the coach to go sit at the other end of the bench. He's sitting there pouting. This is JUCO, by the way. This is junior college. The mom comes from the stands, which you rarely see. Mom comes from the stands, goes and sits next to him, and starts rubbing his shoulders, holding him, talking to him. He looked like he's halfway into tears. So the coach turns around. Something happened in the game. They turned the ball over. Something happened in the game. The coach runs down to the end of the bench, grabs the kid by the wrist and says, "I don't have time for this," and then just throws him back into the game. The kid subs himself back into the game, steals the ball and gets the n1 dunk. The mom turns and goes onto the bench, turns and hugs the coach. And this is all within the span of 45 seconds.
Wow.
I see y'all shaking your head, and
It's knowing your personnel.
it's knowing your personnel, right? But
Know?
in any other situation, when you see things like that, right? When you hear things like that end up bad, right? The mom usually comes yelling at the coach, or the dad is coming across the floor, coming to get the dad. coming to get the coach. And in this instance, they obviously have a relationship. They built a relationship.
Mhm.
They built a sense of trust between coach and player. I know how you may be feeling right now, and I know how you react during certain things. But guess what? Here's some tough love. Go in there and deal with it. And that may not work with everybody. That may not work with every player. Because I know some players right now, if I even thought about doing that, it'd be my email would be ridiculous. But the fact that the mom went and hugged the coach during the middle of the game just lets you know that there's a level of trust. And that's what you got to do. Parents have to trust that the coach has the best interest of the players and their kids at heart. And unfortunately, not every coach does, and that's when the situation becomes so toxic. The blurred line of being competitive and negative. I know coaches that will, curse players out in a heartbeat, curse them out, yelling at them, flipping out on them. But there's a difference. There is a difference, and unfortunately, it gets blurred. There's a difference between saying, "I know you're better than this. What is wrong with you? Cut it out. Get yourself together," as opposed to, "Oh, you F us up. Get the F out of my face. Go sit down over there. I don't want to look at you." There's a big difference. Now, to the other side, you see a screaming coach, you automatically assume the negative. Sometimes you have to listen to the message that is being given. Another story I had a parent who I'm digging into. The matter of fact, it's James. In one of my previous episodes,
James Fun.
James Fun.
James Fun or James Smith?
No, James Fun.
James Fun.
Yeah, I'm giving James the business because I think he can do a lot better than what he's doing. I'm giving him the business. His mama came to me the next day giving me the business because she didn't like how I was giving him the business. But once I spoke to her and she understood where I was coming from, and she knew I loved her baby just as much as she did, then we had no problem. We all wanted the same things for their children. It's just my messaging was a little bit different than everyone else's. Okay, but it's all about the positivity. It's all about what you were saying to the child. It's all about
Side note.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring up that story. I can't imagine a more. I mean, we had a lot of great supportive parents, but I can't imagine a parent more supportive than Mrs. Fun. Shout out to Miss Fun. Mrs.
Yeah. Fact. Shout out to Miss Fun because Miss Fun next game had Gatorade and granola bars and
everything.
Grill outside,
Everything.
cooking hot dogs, hamburgers,
everything.
For everybody. Everything. Why? Because she trusted the coach and she understood the message. She knew it wasn't a toxic situation. It's just we trying to get more out of your child. And that's all we want. That's what most coaches want. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but that's what most coaches want. Yeah. Why do you guys think people can't tell the difference though between toxic and competitive? Because I tend to hear that a lot of people that, not all, it's not fair, but there is a fair number of people that who are not competitive by nature seem to think that competitive people are toxic, and it's not the case. So why do you think people have such a hard time telling the difference?
I don't think they realize that from a coaching perspective, they don't realize that you're equally invested in your players. Like you're there at practice, you put together a couple of training sessions and you know what your players are strong at, what they're weak at, and make them better, make them able to succeed either on the court, on the soccer field, on the lacrosse field, anywhere. Ultimately, at least in my coaching experience, when I was coaching the U9 boys and the U16 girls and in soccer, and I had the U9 boys listen to me. They listened to me all day. They just wanted more. They wanted more, and I gave and I gave and I gave. I got to the point that I couldn't give anymore. I'm like, listen, you guys need a new coach. I can't teach you anymore. This is all I know. And the girls, U16s, were competitive in their own right, but they didn't want to listen. I had a scrimmage between the two teams. I'm reffing, I'm coaching both sides, I'm jumping up and down. I have both families there. I'm super excited about everything. The parents can't figure out why I'm yelling. Meanwhile, I'm on the soccer field and someone down at the other end, and I'm standing on the midfield line. I'm like, no, you need to do this and you need to do that. I'm like, you good? And sure enough, the kid would just give me hold the thumbs up. We both knew that the message was received. Mm-hmm. And then, like after the game, after the scrimmage, I should say, all the parents came up to me and they were like, we've never, like every game you're shouting. And I had to explain that point that I'm equally emotionally invested in these players as you are as parents. I was like, I want them to succeed. Not only do I want them to succeed, I want them to be the best. And I'm training them to be the best. Once that came across, they were like, okay, now we kind of understand, because you're not yelling at people to discipline them. That's never what I did. At the same point in time, all they saw was a 6'5" male on a soccer field jumping up and down, yelling at people.
Mhm.
There's the image, and especially if you're not understanding what's going on, it's just instantly, well, coach is yelling at my kid again. That's not the case.
Raised voices for a lot of people is like a trigger.
Yeah.
Raised voices means,
Yeah,
oh, you're
definitely,
yelling at me,
definitely,
right? And it's like,
definitely.
no, I'm not yelling at you. I'm trying to get your attention because you are looking crazy right now, and I need you to focus. Or if you're having a hard time focusing, tell me. If you don't understand, tell me. That's what I tell my players all the time. If I told you something and you don't know what I'm talking about, I'd rather you come to me and say, Coach, I have no idea what you just said to me. Can you tell me in a different way? I'd rather you do that than to go out there, tell me what you're doing, and then mess up. But
Mhm.
then that's you. I take that as you're not listening. So, and it also takes the players, you're you're giving them voice and they don't realize, right? You can come to coach and tell me what you need. And some people are not ready for that because they're not sure what they need yet. That also
Mhm.
takes time.
Right.
They're not sure of the space, that they can use in order to have that voice. For example, my guys went from telling their parents and me getting emails to knocking on my door in my office and telling me you need to talk. It just, whatever group you have or the type of kid you have, it just takes time. Yeah, coach. So what do you think? Why do you think people can't tell the difference between being toxic and competitive?
Well, I think you make a really strong point in that, yelling, or let's call it what it really is, like passion, care, love. But if you do it loudly, it triggers a whole lot of people. And the irony of it all is, at least from where I stand, and I come to this as, I would say, a parent first,
Mhm.
coach second, player third. I care. I love the kids. I'm invested in the kids, and I want them to succeed, like Adam said. And I'm giving your kid the same energy, the same time, the same thoughtfulness that I give my own kids. And it may come across in a way that makes you uncomfortable, but how different is it from when you're trying to get through your kid behind closed doors or at home? I always try to remember, again, like I'm coming from a place of love, but as a dad, I mean, I think everything has to begin with that title of dad or mentor or whatever you want to call it. If you're in a position to help a kid, help a boy, help a girl, give them everything you have, teach them everything you know, and it's not, they're not processing it quickly enough. I almost feel like you're not well, I guess entitled, but I would betray myself if I didn't react as, wild or crazy or loud. I'd be betraying your kid. As cliche as it sounds, it always for me comes back to, like, the village. I can't raise my kids by myself. I need you. I need you. I need all hands on deck. And I think coaches and mentors and teachers should be included in that equation. And if they really care, if they're doing it right, they're going to get a little loud and they're going to come off a little toxic, but there's no toxicity in it whatsoever. Now, I've been in situations as a dad, again, I've taken my kid to try out for AAU teams, and the coaches wanted them. The coach's energy was like, you know what? This is not a place of love. This is a place of recognition for him, but what is my kid going to get out of this situation? Nothing, because it was toxic. They spoke to the kids, the coaching staff spoke to the kids in a way that made me uncomfortable, and not because they were loud or aggressive or anything like that. I could just sense that there was a switch. There is a switch. It was that fine line, like you guys said before, like you're constantly treading. And I felt in that moment, the coaches crossed that line. I mean, it's hard to identify what that line is and what passes for, toxicity and what passes as just pure competitiveness. Again, if you can step outside yourself and put yourself in a coach or a teacher or a mentor's shoes and see where they're coming from and really analyze like what they're giving your kid, you're able to identify who's for your kid, who's not for your kid. If they're not for your kid, you take them out of that situation and you go find another coach. That's the beauty of it.
Sometimes I get the feeling at certain points when we're loud or trying to get the kids going and things like that, it almost feels like the parents themselves get like PTSD, right? They're kind of flashing back. You laugh, right? But they're kind of flashing back in their moment, where they thought they had that shot but didn't because they heard that loud voice or that loud bang or that, and it kicks in. So the mama bear, papa bear, grandma bear, grandpa bear, all the bears start to come out. And it's like, don't attack my child. Taking yourself out of the situation, taking your own feelings out of the situation, and really taking that time to listen. Like, is what he's saying helpful or harmful?
Right.
Right. And if somebody feels that what I'm saying and how I'm doing things are harmful, and then this is not the program for you, then that's cool. But I know where I'm coming from. I'm always coming from a place of love. I'm always coming from a place of experience. A little bit is also, or a lot of it is I'm trying to give something that I never got.
Yeah, facts.
Right?
Facts.
It's going to come off with extra passion. It's going to come off with a little bit more emotion because I was the big kid that was never going to play high school ball, that was never going to play college ball, that was never going to amount to anything as far as basketball. I was the big kid, so we're not going to worry about the big kid. Just go rebound and go eat your ice cream after.
It's a good point.
My nickname was Biscuit.
You always play 13 to me. Stop it.
My man. I always come from that place. And that's why I always look for, I think that's why I always lean on the underdog kid, the kid that gets overlooked. Because sometimes they just need somebody to believe in them. Half of it, look, 90% of all of this stuff is belief. You got to believe that you can hoop before you hoop. You got to believe that you can do it before you can do it. Just like in life. You believe you can do it, then you put the work in. But if you halfway in and out the door, then it's not for you. But that's okay. But you got to make that decision. Okay. And then the toxicity comes in for the children when they don't feel comfortable in the competitive situation, so they make so many excuses that they ruin experience for themselves and everyone else. Only because they don't feel comfortable. That's something else I've noticed where when kids are unsuccessful in a competitive situation, it's immediately oh, that person is toxic because they're happy that they're better than me. What? Oh, that person's toxic because they just hit a shot and they're celebrating. No, they are celebrating their accomplishment. It has nothing to do with you.
Right.
But they absorb that. So it's, let me find a reason to be unhappy in this situation. It should never be like that. That's another thing that we try to get out of our kids. Like, stop it. It's okay to be excited that you scored. Okay. The problem is, don't score, be excited, and then don't get back on defense. Then we got a problem. Now you're being toxic, right? Because you're so happy just about yourself that you forgot about your teammates in the moment, and you gave up on them just for your moment. Don't be happy because you scored 15 points, but your team lost by 30. That's toxic.
That's toxic.
That's toxic.
Because you're not being a good teammate. There's nothing wrong with being competitive. There's nothing wrong with competition. It breeds character. It forces you to dig in. Oh, yeah, but they suck. I dropped 20. Did you win? No, but I did what I was supposed to do. I dropped 20. You didn't help your team win. The whole purpose of a team sport is to help your team win. If you want to do individual sports, go play bowling or golf.
No, I was just going to say, I think the ultimate irony in this conversation is that competition, it's never about, for me, it's never just about the game or the sport. We all love hoops. We all love sports. We all love to put the time in, put the work in, showcase our skill against other players or other coaches or whatever the situation is. But I can't imagine one time where I didn't explain something to my kids without the metaphor of like basketball. I don't think sports are about teaching the game. You're teaching the game, but like you said, like like you say, you can't hide when you're out there on the floor, right? But you have to put the time in, you have to put the work in, you have to put the unglamorous hours into being competitive, right? And when you don't do that, it seems, it appears as like you failed or the coaches have failed you. It's about preparation for the next phase. The next phase is the next game, the next tournament, whatever. But that translates into everything else in your life, whether it's school, whether it's relationships, whether it's business, whether it's whatever it is. I'm not teaching basketball. I'm teaching life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not teaching life lessons and I'm teaching basketball first, I think that's where the toxicity definitely seeps in, because we've all experienced programs and coaches who are about, I got this kid to this Division I school, I got this kid into the pros, and because of that, they've created like this machine, this marketing basketball machine, where it's just like, it's not about that. It's about, getting kids in the gym, helping kids feel confident about themselves, exposing them to different voices, moving them to the next phase or the next step in their life. Basketball is that's the icing on the cake, getting out there and competing and, winning or not winning. But I think, it's got to be about the kid first, believing in the kid, building in their confidence, and everything else will fall into place, but everything else should also follow. It's the kid first, and when the kid isn't first, that's where the toxicity seeps in, whether it's from coaches, whether it's from auntie, whether it's from the uncle, whether it's from the boys on the block. You got to be careful of that.
We talk about the time, and I want everybody, listening to think about this. You put in at least 20 hours a week to play a 40-minute game. The game only 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Put in 20 hours a week to play a 40-minute game.
32 for the JV kids. Let's keep it a
32,
buck.
let's keep it a buck, 32. And that's a lot of work, a lot of time. That's just a little bit of a time. It's so interesting how they say, oh, you spend too much time playing this sport or you spend too much time practicing. But I don't hear anybody talk to the Broadway performer that they spend too much time on stage to get ready for that 2-hour performance, that 8-hour a day practicing. So why is it for sports that we have to do less, but we expect more? You're expected to perform with less. Just a thought. That's the other thing that becomes toxic. You tell these kids that they don't need to practice and they should focus on other stuff, which is true. Focus on other things, but you have to prepare them to be successful. But then once the game starts, you're yelling at them because they don't know how to dribble. Did you take them to the park to practice dribbling? Or did you let them play Fortnite for 3 hours?
Right.
That's just,
Yeah.
then you're creating your own toxic situation because now you're unhappy, the kid's unhappy, everybody's unhappy in the household. Where for an hour you could have went outside and practiced dribbling, and then you would have played Fortnite for 2 hours. Just that little bit helps. So it's just prioritizing what you want out of life. That's how you cut out some of that toxic stuff. If you work hard and you're unsuccessful, that's fine. That's what happens. You got to keep pushing through, persevere, find a way to get it done because nobody else is going to do it for you. Nobody else is going to do it for you.
Just kind of stem off of that a little bit. When I was a student athlete, especially junior, senior year of high school, when it's SAT time, it's college prep, it's this, it's that, it's everything. My time, I had to improve other aspects because I wanted to be on the court playing basketball. So I had to improve my time management. I had to get my homework done during my free periods. I needed to talk to my teachers, go to my extra help because I wasn't going to be late to practice. That in itself, granted, now we're talking about a high school student who's now getting ready to go to college, a little bit different maturity levels than with younger kids and everything else. But my grades only improved when I was playing sports. Because if I didn't have that, I just had too much time. And I was like, oh yeah, I can go to the gym, I could do this, I could do that, I could go hang out. My work wouldn't get done. So then ultimately it got to the point where I was like, I need to I need to structure my day. So if I don't have basketball practice, I need to do the same thing. Instead of going home during the off season, I stayed at the school. And I kept everything the same throughout the year. And that's what actually helped me improve in that own right, because that was where does competitiveness become toxic? Well, there's an element of where competitiveness wasn't toxic. The competitiveness in me said, you need to do this. This needs to get done. What are you going to do?
The self-challenge, right? The competitiveness, you're competing against yourself. You got to be better versions of yourself.
Listen,
I was-
I hear discipline. I hear
Yep.
focus. I
Mhm.
hear commitment. I hear there was a rabbit or a carrot, and you were the rabbit chasing that carrot, and nothing was going to stop you from getting that carrot. And I can't be mad at that. I can't be mad at that.
You've actually heard me say this to my son when he gets frustrated doing something in the house and you and me are on the phone.
Mhm.
And it was actually one of my coaches that said this to me. Failing is okay. Falling down is okay. Giving up,
Not okay.
that's the only thing that's not okay. I will tolerate everything else, but I will not tolerate you giving up, because I'm not giving up on you.
That's perfect.
I like that. It made me think of a quote that I've used in I'm a screenwriter as well. I'm using it in a screenplay I'm working right now. But it's a quote from Malcolm X. Stumbling is not falling.
Mm-hmm.
So go with that. Go with that.
Stumbling is not falling, right? Oh, my thing is always feel how you feel, but you still got to do it. You got to get up. You got to get moving. So
Mhm.
go over there, feel how you feel, take a moment, take a breath, get back up and get back out there. That's it. Um, two, 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 two people I think about in those situations. Well, the first one is Wiz, right? I remember in this very gym, Wiz got elbowed. He was unhappy, and I was like, "Well, you won't get back out there. You got to deal with it."
I know this story.
Yeah, so I'm giving the short version, but one of my players was in third grade. He was not getting any foul calls. He got elbowed. He got out, was unhappy, and I told him, sip some water. I'm sticking you back in. So either you're gonna like it or you're gonna quit. So he went back out there and he got hit again. He didn't like it, but then I saw him throw a couple of elbows. But then from there on, slowly started figuring out where in eighth grade, man, he was, one of the toughest guys on the floor.
Mhm.
Just because
Definitely.
he definitely one of the toughest guys on the floor. In
Definitely.
that moment, I just tell him, listen, it's okay to feel how you feel, but you still got to deal with it. Are you going to deal with it or not? And he chose to deal with it. And by the way, coach, I don't know if I told you this, but he's actually playing for his high school now. He was messaging me back and forth, trying to get in to a different high school, but the high school he's at now, he made the team. Look, man, he found his way. He went from being a point guard to doing whatever he does, Mr. Wizard, aka. So
He's a savvy player,
happy
lefty.
player,
He
lefty.
got all the good stuff going for him.
He was the only one allowed to break his cuts, because if he broke his cut, that means he saw something I didn't see, and it was okay. And it usually worked out. So I wouldn't say nothing to him if he broke his cut. No offense. Lars talking about discipline and focus. I had another kid, Zuffy, Safar. He never practiced. He never practiced. But he said the only time I can get my work done is when I come into practice in the morning. He would come in 7:30 in the morning. From 7:30 to 8:30, he would come in early, sit in my office, and do his work. And when it came to game time, I gave him minutes. He got his work done like he was supposed to. He was honest with himself. He was honest with me. And at that moment, as coach would say, it wasn't about basketball, right? In my eyes, he earned it. He was honest with himself and he did what he needed to do. And then the kids understood. What the beautiful thing about that was too, the kids never complained, never said anything. The question was always, Zuffy, you finish your work? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then Zuffy, did you finish? Did you finish? Oh, okay. And that was it. And when I put them in, kids never complained. They never fussed. They were happy for the kids. So he used it. He used that. I want to play, but this is the only time I get my work done. Can I get my work done here? Yes. Because at the end of the day, I want you to be successful, right? Use the time. Time management. Shout out to them. So anything else come to mind before we wrap up?
Well, I just think it's a shame that toxicity, I mean, it's a topic we talk about a lot in the world today. Like it's a very hot button topic, but I hate that it's so not stigmatized, but it's so associated with like sports. Like sports are great. Sports are great for boys. Sports are great for girls. Sports are great for adults. Competition brings out the best. You know, it pressure makes diamonds or bust pipes. You know, and these are all lessons that translate to anything and everything in your life. The problem is it can be compromised with, like I said, people who have other ideas or other agendas or other things that don't benefit the kid or the family. And, you know, and I understand. I mean, we all understand. We're all hoopers. We're all New Yorkers. We know that, you know, ball is life in New York City, and it's a lifestyle. It's not just a sport, and how it's a lifestyle, but we also know like how big a role it plays in, like, you know, moving families from one tax bracket to another. And with that, there's a lot of toxicity and a lot of, a lot of bad things can filter into that. And that's, I think, what a lot of people focus on, and they forget that you can teach. It's a language. It's a love language if it's presented the right way, and you can get through to kids. You can get through to adults, but you can get through to kids in a way that you never could before. I mean, you're bringing up, all these blasts from the past. Carla and I, the wife, Coach Carla.
Shout out Coach Carla, marketing, fundraising extraordinaire.
Yes, yes. We were talking about Manny.
My heart just broke, man. That's my guy, man.
We were talking about Manny, and we were talking about all the things that kid had on his plate. The happiest kid you'll ever meet, but that kid had a lot on his plate.
Yes, he did.
And before we brought him into that program, he had, not to put him on blast, but his GPA was here. And by the time he felt fully, indoctrinated into our circle of love and hope and basketball, that GPA was here.
Yeah.
And he had a renewed sense of self. He was part of a family. That's what we need to focus on when it comes to competition and sports, and not enough attention is paid to the good parts.
Like you said, some kids, all they need to know is somebody loves them.
Yeah.
And that's all he needed.
That's all he needed.
He needed to know that we loved him. And then shout out the other coach Cabrera, aka Coach Johnson, aka my wife, the academic advisor. Shout out to her as well for making sure, man, he got that work done and was in his case. We gave him love, and then she snatched the foot. But he got it done.
He got it done.
He got it done. I mean, he even won an award at the end of school during graduation. So to this day, if he sees us, he just hugs us. He cracks jokes and he hugs us. He shows us love because we were there for him. That's all he wanted. The flip side is that he didn't decide to dunk until after the season. I've been trying to teach him how to dunk all season, and then he want to wait until June to be like, "Oh, coach, this is what you was talking about." Now he's dunking on people during open run. Made me sick, but it's all right. It's all right. I still love you, Manny.
Yes, sir. Man. Yes, sir.
All right, guys. That's it. I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you for coming on, Coach. My man Lars, appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your efforts. Coach Andre, you're my brother from another. I stood in this man's kitchen about 7 years ago. It's been like that, right? 7 years?
Something like that, yeah.
6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
Talk about basketball. And now we've got a whole program with multiple
we didn't
teams.
Talk about basketball.
We didn't talk about practice.
We talked about everything. We talked about everything but basketball.
That's true.
That was the root of all of it, which I'm very proud to be a part of.
Yeah.
My wife as well.
Yes, absolutely. And then my man Lars, like I said, the only dude that made me pick up the ball. That's it. I'm not saying no more because people are gonna know all my tricks. All right, gentlemen. Appreciate y'all. Holla.